Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about episode 7, the season finale of Apple TV's Disclaimer. While the vast majority of this episode went exactly as I expected, and anyone who's been watching the movie all season probably knows the critiques I'm still gonna have, I gotta say they did pretty much stick the landing with this finale. Like, I have very few complaints about this episode specifically. It addressed virtually every concern I've expressed throughout the season. It wrapped up everything very well, leaving little to no loose ends. I thought Cate Blanchett did a remarkable job in this episode, really carrying the episode on her back in those scenes with Kevin Kline, because he doesn't talk much in them. The short one she got with Sacha Baron Cohen, he didn't talk much in that one. But the complaints I've had all season, I can't undislike those experiences. Like, I think there were decisions made regarding how this story would be told that ultimately harmed the final product as a whole. But by and large, I thought this was a good show. Like, it possibly could have been a great one. But I think we can all agree that decisions were made in the first 6 episodes that were made for the purpose of preserving this gotcha moment for the finale. And I think those decisions were to the detriment of the overall product. Like, yeah, you nailed the finale. There are going to be a lot of people who just had their socks blown off who are probably going to come here expecting me to share that sentiment with them. And I don't. Like, the execution in the first 6 episodes left so much to be desired that it in a way, it forced me to see everything coming that happened in this episode. Because the events of this episode were the only feasible explanation for what I'd seen in the first 6. So while I acknowledge that this episode did mostly everything right and that it was a very satisfying finale, it didn't have the huge impact with me that it was likely going for, because I saw all this coming due to the fact that I'd already arrived at this place as the only plausible explanation for what I'd seen up to this point. Hey everybody, I just want to take a small break from this review to talk about the various other ways you can engage with me on other platforms. If you're so inclined, and I understand why you wouldn't, I am an acquired taste, but you can join the Patreon where you can get extra content like retro reviews, where I review old shows and movies to see if they still hold up today, Mike's Musings, where I talk about shows I'm watching that I don't cover on the channel, or Mike's VOD, where you can commission me to watch a show, which I will then review on the channel. And if you want to engage with me and chat with me more directly, I also implore you to join the Discord and follow the Facebook page. I set up channels in the Discord for all of us to discuss the shows I'm reviewing on the channel, and I also drop new videos in there, since it's the easiest platform for me to share to from my phone. The Facebook can be really fun because I sort of live comment on shows I'm watching, often while under the influence, I'm not gonna lie. And I'll also share news there, both about television and film, and about myself as well. So if you like my content, you want to be more engaged, you think I'm charming, or you simply want to show support, feel free to sign up for the Patreon or join the Discord or Facebook today. Links to all platforms are in every video description. Remember to share all my shit to your respective social media platforms. And now back to this review. Now, when I said arrived here, I mean that I'd already deduced that Catherine was going to have a different version of events from what took place in the book. I didn't explicitly say these words on camera, but I did kind of assume that her different version of events likely included a rape. But if you've been watching my videos, what have I been saying all season? If the book isn't true, why has she not once refuted the details of the book? They made a lazy attempt at answering that question in the finale, so I'll give them props for knowing it's a question that needed to be answered. But someone told me in the comments that she does refute the details of the story in the book. And I replied to that person like, yeah, that's an interesting decision to make, to change for this show. You know, I think the show overall works better if we merely suspect that there are 2 different versions and we just don't know which one is the right one. We don't even need to know the details of Catherine's version. Just her saying it's not that would have been enough. They could still hit us with the reality in the finale and still shock the audience with that. The difference is, by not having her refute the details, it forces the audience to accept the version we saw in the first 6 episodes as fact. But there's too many goddamn holes in the version that we saw. So it creates this like disconnect of, you know, the way I'm seeing things, it should be true, but then all of these other things don't make sense. And that lessened my experience of watching the show in general, just so you could go, aha, gotcha, in the finale. And I don't think the finale was worth what it cost. You know, that episode, it wasn't that fire. It was cool, but it wasn't that fire. And that reveal was too predictable for me to have sat through six episodes pointing out the myriad of things that didn't make sense. But let me stop throwing shots and start giving examples, especially since some of you here may not have seen my previous video, so you don't know what I've been saying all season. One of my biggest concerns is how could Nancy have possibly known this level of detail about Jonathan's experiences if Jonathan died before she even got to see him? If he wrote it in a journal, where's the journal? Why hasn't it been mentioned? If he wrote her a letter or called her and told her about it, am I now expected to believe that he told his mom about all the ass play he was engaging in? And side note on that, Nancy a little freak to have made this whole shit up and voluntarily included that detail. Like, you could have just told a story about how she seduced as a older woman. She seduced this young man. She could have made that story nice and sexy, kept the Kylie Minogue scene in there, all that. Throwing in that ass play just lets me know what kind of shit Nancy was on. No pun intended. But anyway, like I said, how does Nancy have the details necessary to write this book? It was the biggest question I had all season. The only viable explanations were he wrote it like in a journal that he sent to her or that she found, or it didn't happen that way and Nancy made it all up. Last week, with them paying the visit to the room that Jonathan stayed in when he was in Italy and not retrieving a journal, I pretty much landed on it probably didn't go down the way the book is saying that it did. And the show didn't want us to go there, though. It didn't want us to think that what we were seeing may not be true because it wanted to do the big reveal in the finale. And I get that. Like, I get that, you know, wanting to, like, shock everybody in the finale. I get it. I do. But how did Nancy have these details? It was too big of a question to pretend like it didn't exist. And it still ultimately pushed me to the place that you didn't want me to go in the first place, which was assuming that the book wasn't true. So now I'm spending all season frustrated with the idea of Nancy having this level of detail for her book. And then I'm also not surprised by the revelation of the finale. So you see why I say that the execution harmed the overall product now? Like, you feel me on that at least a little bit? And if you don't, I'm cool giving you another example. So let's talk about the narration. The narration became distracting to the point of why are they even doing this? Like, so here we go. You got Catherine narrating for herself, Robert, and Nicholas, often narrating thoughts for them that she couldn't possibly know. You got Stephen narrating for himself. You got the question of, is this even Catherine narrating? But then she refers to herself in the first person sometimes. But then the narrator is also actually Indira Varma and not Cate Blanchett. And then in this episode, the narrator refers to her as Catherine rather than saying I. And the narration was just all over the place. And it was distracting while it was happening, particularly when she's narrating thoughts for people that she couldn't possibly know what they were thinking. And I proposed in my last video that the only thing that really makes sense is if Catherine is like narrating her own book that she's written about the events of this show. Like this book coming to light that's not true, and then her explaining, you know, this is what happened, this is what Stephen Brickstad did to me. This, you know, her telling this story that we're watching through book. And now, I don't know, there was a portion of the narration in the finale that made it seem like the narration was her telling the story to Stephen. Like, I'm like, okay, well, that's not the same as her writing her own book, but I can accept that. Like, the narration this whole time has been her explaining to Stephen what happened. But then the narration continued after she was no longer talking to Stephen. And again, it referenced Catherine in the third person at some point. And she apparently didn't write a book, or at least we don't see that she did in this finale. So what the fuck was the narration about? Like, why was it there? Like, and even if you say, and this is what I said in the first episode, or my video for the first episode, even if you want to say it was a stylistic choice, I can accept that. But it was so all over the place and unfocused, and because of that, it was just distraction. It was just a distraction. Distracting. I'm sorry. If you're going to have it, don't have it be so bad that it's noticeable and distracting. So again, what am I saying? The execution here harmed the overall product. Hell, they still could have nailed it if they left it open for interpretation, whether or not Catherine's version of events was true. Like, is she telling the truth about Jonathan raping her? Like, for a good portion of the episode, I thought that. Like, it would be pretty cool if they left it open that Catherine just might be lying. So we'd have to wonder what actually happened. Is it her version of events or is it the book's version of events? But then Catherine was like, oh, so you want proof? Well, I grabbed a handful of face cream and I shot his jizz out of my cooch into the jar. And I jarred it. I'm like, all right, well, you don't make that claim if you can't back it up. Like, I expect her to reach in her bag and like pull out an oil of Olay jar. Like, see, you smell the Axe body spray. It's revolting. But like, I like an ambiguous ending, and a lot of the things that bug me would have bugged me less if they felt like clues to a truth that I just never would know, rather than feeling like sloppy ways of keeping me in the dark until you can pull the rug out from under me in the finale. And then also fail at pulling the rug out from under me in the finale. But back to the finale, I want to touch on a couple things before I wrap up. This finale did wrap up virtually every loose end. I don't like that I said wrap up 2 sentences in a row there, but what's done is done. But like I said, it wrapped up virtually every loose end except for one. And I feel like the show gave me enough to kind of even deduce an answer to that. My question of where did Nancy get this level of detail for the book, it wasn't entirely answered. Like, telling me that her version of events wasn't true doesn't answer it. Well, I'm sorry, it does answer that question. That she just made it up. But why? Why did she make it up? Why make up such a damning story about Catherine for no reason? Like, her reason for writing the book would be everything that we saw in the first 6 episodes, all the shitty stuff that Catherine did, all that. But that's not what happened. So what prompted her to create a story that was so damning for Catherine for no reason? And the show doesn't clearly answer that question, but I do think it did answer it nonetheless. You just kind of read between the lines a little bit. So remember the whole thing with the girl that Jonathan originally went to Italy with, Sasha, and how she had to come home early because her aunt died? But then we learned in episode 6 that that's not actually what happened. And whatever reason Sasha came home made Sasha's, what was her name? Emma, Sasha's mother, Emma, so resentful of Jonathan that she didn't even care when Nancy told her that Jonathan died. Couple that with Steven's monologue in this episode about how he kind of like allowed Nancy to like not manipulate him, but like to convince him that Jonathan was a better person than deep down Steven felt that he was. And I think we're left to deduce that Jonathan probably also assaulted Sasha. And if Nancy knew about that, and I mean, even if she didn't, but she knew that Jonathan wasn't a good dude, and maybe she suspected that he also assaulted Sasha, then she finds these pictures of Catherine after he dies. Like, that to me is enough motivation for her to want to paint him in a more positive light and as a kind-hearted victim, kind of like in his honor. Like, his legacy and memory can be something where he's the victim rather than the abuser, thus making him more sympathetic. It's kind of like a final way that people will remember him. And then that feeds into Steven saying that she always saw him as better than he actually was. So, like, she might not have known he also assaulted Catherine, but maybe she knows that he did assault Sasha, also saw the pictures of Catherine, and knew that damage control needed to happen if things weren't going to look really bad for Jonathan after his death. So I kind of like how the show left me just enough to kind of piece together an explanation for that on my own. Like, I kind of like when shows do that. And while I still don't like the idea of how they hid the idea that there might be another version of events, right down to the point where it's like she's losing everything. If this isn't how it went down, she'd have said something by now. But I do like how they did at least attempt to address that by having Robert ask her why she never said anything, even after, the books and the pictures came out. Now, what I didn't like was her response of, I can't forgive you because it's almost like you're relieved I was raped and it's easier for you to accept that I was raped. Like, I don't think you get to flip this on him when you never explained yourself. But again, when we talk about not explaining yourself, I think this happens in real life. Like, I don't think this is how these events would have actually taken place if the show wasn't trying to do what it did, like hiding its hand until the finale. Like, if it wasn't so focused on doing that, then I don't think Catherine actually gives that as an explanation for withholding the truth. Like, once your husband is like, explain these pictures of you wearing the lingerie I got you that weren't taken by me, and then this book that says you seduced the fuck out of this boy after I left and then left him to die saving our son. Explain that to me. once that happens, you don't even have to start explaining the rape yet. You don't have to be like, I was raped. Like, and she claims kind of like, yeah, I wasn't ready to talk about the rape yet. You don't have to do that. You could just say, that's not what happened. And then everything else can spark from there. Since she didn't say that's not what happened and continue to let him believe that it is what happened, you can't now flip it on him and be like, you shouldn't have believed it, even though I gave you every reason to believe it, by reacting as if it was true and never ever denying it. I think it's ironic that Stephen and Catherine, the two enemies of this show, both hit Robert with the same bullshit line, absolving themselves of any responsibility. Like, I don't know, why'd you believe it? Like, nah. The last thing I didn't like, and it's about this episode specifically and not the show as a whole, is the fact that this episode spent a pretty substantial amount of time following Stephen and Catherine in their respective Ubers. Like way too long for it to not have been a literal car chase. Like, they were also way too close to each other in arrival at the hospital, considering that he should have had a colossal head start on her. Like, she was unconscious from sleeping pills when he left. We have to assume, us the viewer, right now, you and I, we have to assume that she woke up instantly. Like, as soon as he left, she woke up, which is a ridiculous thought. But we have no choice, because she calls an Uber, she has to wait for that Uber, she even spends part of the route actually running to the hospital, and then just like arrives not too long after Steven. Like, if she was knocked out for even 15 minutes, that doesn't work. But he OD'd her on sleeping pills. She should have been knocked out for hours. Like, even if you naturally take a nap, you could be knocked out for an hour. She got put to sleep and woke up instantly, because that's the only explanation. So yeah, I really, really bad with the Uber chasing thing. But I also kind of would have liked an explanation for why he cut the X in his arm. Like, we see in this in Catherine's version of events that he did it on purpose and he made her like lick the blood. Okay. Maybe I missed it, but that was a strange detail to include and not explain. Like, why was that something that Jonathan was into? But at least they did explain why it was on his body. I just think that they thought that was enough to like, hey, just put in something that says why it's there. And that's not enough. Lastly, and again, this could have been an effect that this show benefit from all season if they just threw it out there that there may be another version of events. But I liked how learning that Catherine was raped kind of reframes everything that we've seen up to this point. Like, think about Steven being willing to go as far as to kill Nick. He's about to kill a 25-year-old kid with a drug problem because he's mad at the woman that his son raped. Like think about what that does to Catherine. To hold this hatred for this person who raped you, but then he also gave his life saving your son. That internal conflict's got to be just soul crushing. And then we find out in this episode she got pregnant. Could have been Robert's, could have been hers, who knows? But what if she keeps that baby? Imagine that same person who raped you but saved your son's life being the father of your child. Now, not only are you withholding from Robert that this may not be his kid or is not his kid, you have to look at that kid and know it's the product of a rape from someone who saved the life of your other kid. Like, man. Like, he didn't kill her, but what if Steven had put enough of those sleeping pills in her in her tea to kill her? And it kicks in right after he learns that his son raped her. Like, there's like so many heavy and weighty kind of things that could crush a person that Catherine was either juggling or could have been juggling had things gone worse. And that's crazy. So, all in all, I thought this was a pretty solid show. I thought the performances were great. I thought the concept was good. Even though I have my major issues regarding how they executed on this story, I still found the show enjoyable to watch. I was invested in what happened. I just think this is yet another, and this is a big trend in these mini series that have been coming, these limited series. But I think this is another mini series that put too much value in trying to pull off a twist at the end and keep the audience in the dark for all the other episodes other than the last one. And they sacrificed the earlier episodes to an unrecoverable degree in order to do unrecoverable. I feel like that's right. It's a shame too, because if the book's version of events were just in question, like not even just be thinking maybe that's not what happened. Like, I don't even need to know for sure that there was another version. Just make me question it. Like, maybe the book's not accurate. If they'd done that, I think you get a show that is significantly more engaging throughout the entire season, and you don't lose the impact of the twist in the finale. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a middle-aged guy talking about TV shows. But let me know what you thought in the comments, and until next time, peace.